The fine rain fell on the old roof when she looked him in the eyes and whispered with a faint smile, "Promise me you won't cry, sir." Her body no longer had strength. Her face was pale as the grey morning, and the sound of the wind mixed with the simple machines trying to keep her alive. In that small, secluded house, nestled between rolling hills and cornfields, time seemed suspended, as if the sky itself had paused to hear the farewell she was trying to utter. But goodbyes aren't always the end. Sometimes they're just the beginning of a miracle no one dared to ask for. This is the story of a love born in silence, nurtured in pain, and reaped in faith. A story where the tough country soil bore witness that when two hearts decide to fight together, even death has to retreat. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The sun hadn't yet risen when Tomas lit the lamp in the kitchen. The smell of stale coffee hung in the air, mixed with the scent of damp wood and earth seeping through the window cracks. He set the fire to low, put water on to boil, and stood there, staring at the flame as if waiting for an answer that would never come. It had been 3 years since he buried Helena, 3 years since the house stopped being a home and became just a place where he slept, ate, and waited for the next day to arrive. The walls still held the echo of her laughter, the shuffle of her slippers in the hall, the scent of bread baking on Sunday mornings. But all of that was just memory now. Ghosts wandering the empty rooms, reminding him of what would never return. Tomas was 42, but he looked 60. The broad shoulders of a man who had worked his whole life were stooped by the invisible weight of loneliness. His eyes, the color of wet earth, rarely met anyone else's. He spoke little, smiled even less. In the village, he was known as the widower on the hill, respected, but distant. A good man, they said, but closed up like a locked door. He poured the coffee into his enamel mug and sat at the table, watching the dawn paint the cornfields pink through the window. The farm was small, but it was his. He'd inherited it from his father, expanded it with his own sweat. He had cows, chickens, a garden that insisted on growing even when he forgot to tend it. The land was generous, but generosity, he'd learned, didn't warm the bed or fill the silence. He finished his coffee and went out for his first round. The dew covered everything like a frosty blanket. His boots sank into the mud on the path leading to the barn. The cows greeted him with their low moos, indifferent to his sadness. He fed them, checked the water troughs, fixed a loose board on the fence. All mechanical, all empty. When he returned home, the sun was already high. He washed his hands at the iron sink, dried them on the worn cloth hanging on a nail. It was then he heard the sound of an engine climbing the dirt road. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, he saw the old pickup truck of João Miguel, the village blacksmith, kicking up dust. Tomas stepped out onto the porch, crossing his arms. João Miguel was an old friend, one of the few who still visited him occasionally, bringing news or asking for help with a fence. The blacksmith parked and got out, taking off his straw hat and wiping his forehead with his forearm. "Tomas," he greeted with a brief nod. "João," Tomas replied, descending the steps. "Fence trouble?" The blacksmith glanced back towards the passenger seat where a woman was sitting. She wore a simple, faded blue dress and had a scarf tied around her brown hair. Her face was delicate but tired, very tired. "Not fence trouble," João Miguel said, lowering his voice. "Her trouble." Tomas frowned. "Who is she?" "Laura. Came from a ways off, looking for a quiet place to rest." There was something in the pause that made Tomas understand. It wasn't rest. It was farewell. "She sick?" João Miguel nodded slowly. "She is, and she doesn't have family around here. I asked in the village, but nobody has room. Or the nerve. I thought of you. I know you've got that spare room out back. She won't be any trouble, Tomas. Just needs a roof over her head. She can pay with sewing if need be." Tomas looked at the woman again. She was watching him through the fogged-up window, her dark eyes large, like someone who had seen too much. There was no plea in her gaze, just weariness, just acceptance. He sighed deeply, running a hand over his rough face. "How long does she have?" Doctor said, "Maybe 3 months, maybe less." Silence. The wind rustled the leaves of the guava tree near the fence. A chicken pecked near the porch. Tomas wasn't a man of many words, but he wasn't a man to turn his back on someone in need either. "All right," he said finally. "You can bring her." João Miguel let out a sigh of relief and nodded to Laura. She got out slowly, as if each movement cost her energy she didn't have. Tomas saw she was holding a small, worn leather suitcase and a cloth bag. Nothing more. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice low but steady. There was no self-pity, just simple gratitude. "Tomas," he corrected, taking the suitcase from her hand. It was light, too light. "The room's small, but it's got a bed and a window. Looks out on the fields." She just nodded. João Miguel said a quick goodbye, promising to return next week. The pickup truck disappeared down the road, leaving Tomas and Laura alone on the porch. He led her inside. The hallway smelled of mildew and loneliness. Laura said nothing, just followed, her steps silent. Tomas opened the door to the back room, formerly used for storing tools, now empty, with an iron bed against the wall and an old dresser. "I'll get some bedding," he said, leaving before she could reply. When he returned with crisp sheets, Laura was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window. The morning light illuminated her face, revealing her pallor, the deep circles under her eyes, but also something else, a serenity that Tomas hadn't expected to find. He spread the sheets. "Thank you," she repeated, taking them with delicate hands. "If you need anything, just call." She nodded. Tomas left, closing the door softly. In the hallway, he stopped and leaned his forehead against the cool wall. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know if he was ready to watch someone die again. But something inside him, something that had been dormant for 3 years, had awakened at the sight of those tired eyes. And he could no longer pretend he was dead inside. Laura spent the first few days in silence. She left her room only to go to the bathroom or get water. Tomas saw her in glimpses, a delicate shadow crossing the hall, always in the same blue dress, always barefoot. He left food on the small table near her door, bread and butter, reheated coffee, sometimes a plate of rice and beans. She ate little, very little. On the 4th morning, Tomas woke earlier than usual. He dreamed of Helena, not a nightmare, but a gentle memory of her humming as she watered the flowers. He lay there for a few minutes, trying to hold on to the good feeling before it slipped away. But reality soon returned, the cracked ceiling, the hard mattress, the heavy silence. He got up, made coffee, and went out to tend to the animals. When he came back, he saw that the door to Laura's room was ajar. He hesitated. He knocked lightly on the wood. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yeah," she replied softly. "You can come in." He pushed the door open. Laura was sitting on the bed, a piece of fabric in her hands and a needle. She was sewing something. It looked like a patch. She looked at him with those big eyes, and for the first time, Tomas saw a hint of a smile. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I found this cloth in the dresser. It was torn. I thought I'd fix it." Tomas recognized the fabric. It was an old towel Helena used to cover the table at holiday parties. He swallowed hard. "You don't have to," he started but stopped. She was already sewing, her fingers nimble and precise. "I like to sew," Laura said, not looking up from her work. "It distracts me, and it makes me feel useful." Tomas stood there, not knowing what to say. Then he simply nodded and left. But that afternoon, when he returned from the fence, he found the towel folded on the kitchen table, perfectly mended. He ran his fingers over the fabric, feeling his throat tighten. The following days took on a new rhythm. Laura started going out more. First, just to the porch, where she'd sit in the old rocking chair and gaze out at the fields. Then to the kitchen, where she'd make tea and leave a cup for Tomas too. He never asked for it, but she always left one. On a rainy afternoon, Tomas came in soaked, carrying firewood for the hearth. Laura was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. The smell of vegetable soup filled the house. "I made soup," she said without turning around. "There were carrots and potatoes in the garden. I hope you don't mind." Tomas took off his dripping hat and hung it on a nail. "No," he replied. "I don't mind." She served 2 bowls. They sat at the table, facing each other. The rain drummed on the roof. Tomas ate slowly, surprised by the taste. It had been a long time since he'd eaten something made with care. "It's good," he said. Laura smiled faintly. "My grandmother taught me. She used to say food made with calm nourishes more than just the body." He looked at her. He wanted to ask about her grandmother, about her family, about how she'd ended up here. But he didn't. He knew pain wasn't something you demanded to hear about. You told it when you were ready. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, stirring the soup in her bowl. That night, before sleeping, Tomas listened to the sound of the rain. But it wasn't just the rain he heard. It was the sound of someone alive in the house, the creak of the rocking chair, the soft shuffle of bare feet in the hallway. And, for the first time in 3 years, the silence didn't hurt so much. The news that Tomas had a woman living with him spread through the village like wildfire. At the Saturday morning market, the stares were many, the whispers even more so. "Widowed less than a year, and already he's got another one," muttered Mrs. Carmen, the store owner, to her neighbor. "And sick, they say," the other replied softly. "Poor thing, or maybe she's smart, who knows?" Tomas heard it all, but pretended he didn't. He bought what he needed, flour, salt, oil, and left without looking at anyone. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. He never had. But Laura, when she heard the whispers João Miguel let slip, felt the weight of shame descend on her shoulders like wet lead. She was on the porch, sewing a shirt Tomas had torn on the fence when he returned from the village. He got out of the truck with a grim expression, carrying the bags of groceries. Laura stood up. "Let me get those," she offered. "No need," he said, far too curtly. She stepped back, sensing the shift in the air. Tomas went inside, dumped everything in the kitchen, and went out again, straight to the barn. Laura stood frozen, needle still in hand, her heart aching. She knew what that meant. She knew her presence there was causing trouble, and the last thing she wanted was to be a burden. She was already a burden to herself. That evening, she knocked on his bedroom door. Tomas opened it, surprised. "I need to speak with you," Laura said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Tomas," he corrected, tired. "I told you. Call me Tomas." "Tomas, then." She took a deep breath. "I know they're talking. I know my being here is causing problems. I can leave. João Miguel will pick me up if I ask." Tomas frowned. "Why?" "Because I don't want to tarnish your name. I don't want them to think badly of you, of Tomas." He was silent for a moment, just looking at her. Then slowly he shook his head. "Laura, I buried my wife 3 years ago. Since then, this house has been a tomb. I've been a tomb." He paused, running a hand over his face. "You came here and brought life back. I don't care what they say." "I never have." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked quickly, holding it back. "But I care," she whispered. "I don't want to be another cross for you to bear." Tomas took a step forward. For the first time, he placed a hand on her shoulder, a light touch, careful. "You're not a cross, Laura. You're a guest. You're a friend. And as long as you want to stay, there's a place here." She sobbed softly, lowering her head. He didn't hug her. He wasn't a man for grand gestures. But he stood there, his hand on her shoulder, until she stopped trembling. "Thank you," Laura murmured finally. "You're welcome." When she returned to her room, Tomas remained standing in the hallway. He knew the gossip wouldn't stop. He knew the village wouldn't understand, but for the first time in a long time he didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, he had something to protect. The weeks passed slowly, with the same cadence as life in the country. The corn grew, the cows gave milk, the rain came and went, and little by little Laura and Tomas created a routine that didn't need words to exist. She'd wake up early, before the sun, and put on coffee. He'd already be in the barn, but when he returned, he'd find a steaming cup waiting on the table alongside honeyed bread. Laura didn't eat much herself, but she liked to prepare meals. She said it was a way of thanking him. Tomas, in turn, would bring chopped firewood, fix the rocking chair that creaked too much, leave wild flowers on her windowsill. Small gestures, but gestures that meant something. One Saturday morning, Laura asked to help in the garden. Tomas hesitated. She was fragile, tired easily, but he saw something in her eyes he recognized, the need to feel alive. "All right," he said, "but take it easy." She smiled. It was a small smile, but a genuine one. They worked side by side. Tomas dug, and Laura planted the lettuce and cilantro seedlings. The sun beat down, but the shade of the old pecan tree offered respite. He watched her from the corner of his eye, ready to step in if she faltered. But Laura was tougher than she looked. Her hands sank into the soil with a practiced gentleness, like someone who knew each seed held a promise. "My grandmother used to say, 'Planting is an act of faith,'" she said, breaking the silence. "Because you're putting something in the ground with no guarantee it'll sprout." Later that afternoon, as they rested on the porch, Tomas noticed Laura gazing at the horizon with a faraway look. "What are you thinking about?" he ventured. She smiled faintly, her eyes still on the rolling fields. "I was thinking I never imagined I'd end up here, in a place so quiet, so beautiful." So he just nodded and stayed there beside her, listening to the wind rustle through the pecan leaves. That night, Laura had an episode. Tomas woke to the sound of muffled coughing coming from her room. He got up quickly, went to her door, and knocked. "Laura?" When the episode passed, Laura lay back down, exhausted. He brought her water, helped her drink. "Sorry," she whispered. "Nothing to be sorry about." And how, for the first time, the thought of losing this hurt more than the memory of what he had already lost. The coughing fit was just the beginning. In the following days, Laura worsened. Her pallor increased, and the strength she tried to hide began to fail. Tomas saw it, and the old fear returned. The fear of hospitals, of doctors shaking their heads, of goodbyes he didn't know how to give. But this time, he didn't stand by. On cold June morning, Tomas entered her room with a mug of hot tea and found Laura trembling under the covers, even with the sun streaming through the window. "You have a fever," he stated, touching her forehead. "It's cold," Laura murmured, her voice weak. Tomas left and returned with more blankets, with a hot water bottle he fashioned from an old thermos, with damp cloths for her forehead. He sat beside the bed and stayed there, changing the cloths, adjusting the blankets, holding her hand when the tremors became worse. "You should take me to the hospital," Laura whispered, her eyes closed. "No," he said firmly, "not yet. I'm going to get Dr. Alvaro to come here." He grabbed his truck and sped down the dirt road as if the devil himself were chasing him. In town, he went straight to Dr. Alvaro's house, a retired physician who still made house calls for emergencies. He knocked hard. Dr. Alvaro opened the door, surprised. "Tomas?" He listened to her lungs, checked her blood pressure, asked questions. Tomas paced outside, his hands sweating. When the doctor emerged, his face was serious. "It's pneumonia," he said. "As weak as she is, it's dangerous. She needs antibiotics, complete rest, and close attention. Just tell me what to do." "Why?" On one particularly difficult pre-dawn morning, when her fever spiked and Laura started to ramble, calling out names he didn't recognize. Tomas sat beside her, held her hand, and began to sing. It was a song Helena used to sing, an old ballad about fields and skies. His voice was deep, off-key, but sincere. Laura calmed down. Her breathing eased, and in the darkness, she squeezed his hand back. When the sun rose, the fever had broken. Laura improved little by little. The pneumonia receded, pushed back by the antibiotics, by Tomas's care, and by a quiet stubbornness she carried within. In 2 weeks, she was able to sit on the porch again, wrapped in blankets, soaking up the sun. But something had changed. Tomas could tell. She was quieter, more distant. She smiled less, and when he caught her gazing at the horizon, he saw a weight in her eyes that hadn't been there before. One Sunday afternoon, as Tomas was fixing the fence near the house, he heard the sound of a car coming up the road. Visitors were rare. When he saw who it was, his stomach tightened. It was Father Durval, the village priest. A short man with round glasses and a worn cassock, known for his kindness but also for his sharp tongue when it came to matters of morality. Tomas wiped his hands on a rag and went to greet him. "Father, may I come in? A woman living here alone with you, without marriage, without kinship, that's not right." He stood, put on his hat, and left, leaving Tomas alone with the weight of his words. That night, Tomas couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, looking at the stars, thinking. Marrying Laura, would it be a lie? Would it be right? He liked her, that was true. But love? He didn't even know what love was anymore. The next day, it was Laura who broke the silence. She was in the kitchen peeling potatoes when he walked in. "Tomas, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you thought about getting married again?" The question caught him by surprise. He froze, unsure how to answer. "Why?" he asked. Laura lowered her eyes, fiddling with the potatoes. "Because I know the priest came by, and I know what he must have said." She took a deep breath. I'd understand if you wanted me to leave. I don't want to cause—" "Laura, stop," Tomas interrupted, sitting at the table. "You're not causing anything, and you're not leaving." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "But what if we got married, on paper, just to calm the town, to give me a name before I go?" Tomas felt his chest tighten. The idea of marriage had weight, but the idea of Laura leaving had more. "Is that what you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to be a problem for you." He reached out and touched her hand, still smudged with potato dirt. "You're not a problem, Laura. You never were." She cried softly. He did too. And in that silence full of tears, without either of them saying it aloud, something was decided. The wedding was simple. Father Durval officiated on a Thursday morning in the small chapel in town. There were no flowers, no reception, just John Michael and his wife as witnesses, and a signature on a yellowed paper that smelled musty. Tomas wore his Sunday best. Laura, a white dress she'd sewn in a hurry, simple but pretty. When the priest declared them husband and wife, there was no kiss, just a handshake, a look, and the silent promise to take care. But the peace lasted little. A week after the wedding, a black car drove up the road. It was an old Ford, driven by a man in a grey suit and a grim expression. Tomas was in the barn when he saw it. Laura was in the kitchen. The man got out and went straight to the door. He knocked hard. Laura opened it, startled. "Mrs. Laura Mendez?" he asked without preamble. "Yes." "My name is Cristiano Salazar. I'm an attorney. I represent the Mendez family from Caldas. I'm here to discuss a delicate matter." Tomas came running, sweaty and suspicious. "Who are you?" The lawyer ignored him, keeping his eyes on Laura. "Are you the niece of Armando Mendez, who passed away 3 months ago?" Laura paled. I am then you are aware that there is an outstanding debt in the amount of 12,000 cruzeros incurred by the deceased and guaranteed by a solidary endorsement signed by you. I signed it, but I didn't know. Ignorance does not nullify a contract, ma'am. The debt is yours now, and it must be paid within 60 days. Otherwise, we will go to court. He extended an envelope. The notification is here. Tomas snatched the envelope from his hand. Get off my property. The lawyer smiled coldly. With pleasure. 60 days, ma'am. Good afternoon. He got into his car and drove away. Laura collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. Tomas tore open the envelope and read. It was true. 12,000 cruzeros. A fortune. Laura, what is this? She covered her face with her hands. My uncle, he asked me to sign, said it was just a formality, that it would never be used. I trusted him. She sobbed. Tomas, I don't have that kind of money. I have nothing. He knelt in front of her, holding her hands. I know, and it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. How? How do we figure it out? I brought this into your life, Tomas. Laura, listen. He made her look at him. I don't care about the money. I care about you, and we'll find a way. But inside, Tomas was terrified. 12,000 cruzeros was more than he had, more than he could scrape together in 60 days. The farm was small, his savings even smaller. That night, he stayed awake, calculating, poring over papers, trying to find a way out. Laura, in the next room, cried softly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Tomas felt he might not be strong enough to protect her. Tomas spent the next few days like a man in a trance. He worked harder, slept less, spoke little. He went to the bank, talked to neighbors, tried to sell cattle. But the reality was harsh. He didn't have 12,000 cruzeros, and he couldn't raise the amount in time. Laura, meanwhile, sank into deep guilt. She stopped eating properly, stopped sewing, stopped smiling. Tomas saw life draining out of her again, and it hurt more than any debt. One night, sitting at the table after a silent dinner, Laura broke the silence. Tomas, I'm leaving. He looked up, startled. What? I'm leaving. I'll go find my family in São Paulo. I'll try to sort this out myself. I can't. Laura, you're not going anywhere, he interrupted, his voice firm. But the debt is mine. I can't let you. The debt is ours, Tomas cut in, slamming his hand on the table. You're my wife, on paper and in my heart, and I won't let you face this alone, Laura cried. He stood up, went to her and hugged her. It was the first time he'd truly held her. He felt her fragile body tremble, and he held her tighter. We'll figure it out, he whispered. Together. The next day, Tomas had an idea. He went into town and looked for Dr. Alvaro. Doctor, I need a favor. What is it, Tomas? Laura? She needs treatment, real treatment, not just for pneumonia, for what's killing her. The doctor sighed. Tomas, you know that's expensive, very expensive, and there are no guarantee. I know, but he took a deep breath. If I sell the farm, will that cover it? The doctor was silent, shocked. Tomas, are you sure? I am. And the debt? The farm will pay for everything. There'll even be some left over. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. You love her this much? Tomas didn't answer immediately, but when he did, his voice was firm. I do. More than I thought I was still capable of. The doctor nodded. I'll do what I can, but you need to talk to her first. Tomas returned home, determined. He found Laura on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset. He sat beside her. Laura, I'm going to sell the farm. She turned, startled. What? No, I am. With the money, I'll pay off the debt and still have enough left to take you to a good hospital, one that knows how to treat you right. Tomas, you can't do this. That land is your life. It was, he corrected, taking her hand. Now you are. But he loved them less than this woman who, unintentionally, had taught him how to live again. The decision was made, but the road would be long. Selling the ranch wasn't simple. There were papers, there was bureaucracy, there was time, and time was something Laura didn't have. 2 days after their talk on the porch, Laura had another episode. This time it was worse. She woke up in the middle of the night, coughing up blood. Tomas found her clutching the edge of the bed, her eyes wide with fear. "Laura!" He scooped her up and carried her to the pickup truck, wrapped in blankets, and tore down the road like a madman. The town was dark, but Dr. Alvaro answered the door in his pajamas. "It's serious," the doctor said after examining her. "She needs to go to the capital now." The drive to the capital took 3 hours over bad roads under a steady, fine rain. At the hospital, the doctors rushed her away. Tomas sat in the waiting room on a hard plastic chair, his hands trembling, his heart pounding. Dr. Alvaro stood beside him. "She's strong, Tomas. Doesn't look it. Strength isn't always loud." But he hesitated. "Her blood type is rare, AB negative. We don't have it in stock right now. We're trying to get it, but how long does she have? Hours, maybe less." They took it. More than the recommended amount. Tomas insisted. He felt dizzy, but it didn't matter. Only Laura mattered. When he woke up, hours later, he was in a bed next to hers. Laura was sleeping, pale but alive. The machines beeped softly. He reached out and touched her hand. "Tomas!" Her voice was weak. He smiled, tired. "I'm here. You saved me. We saved each other." There in that cold, impersonal hospital room with beeping machines and too much white light, the love between them stopped being silent. It was a shout. It was a fight. It was shared blood. 3 days later, Laura was discharged. The doctor said she needed rest, care, time, but there was hope. The disease was in remission. When they returned to the ranch, the whole town knew. João Miguel had organized a work party. Neighbors who used to gossip now brought food, firewood, help. Donna Carmen from the general store brought chicken soup and apologized softly. "We were wrong about you two," she said. Tomas just nodded. That night, sitting on the porch, Laura looked at Tomas with eyes full of gratitude and something more. "You gave up the ranch for me." "No," he corrected. "I chose you. It's different." Tomas had managed to renegotiate the debt with the help of Father Durval and some neighbors who, touched by the story, lent what they could. The land remained, the house remained, and more importantly, Laura remained. She wasn't cured. The doctors had made it clear the disease was chronic, that there would be ups and downs. But she was alive, and that, for Tomas, was everything. On a clear spring morning, Tomas woke to the smell of baking bread. He got up surprised and went to the kitchen. Laura was there, an apron tied around her waist, her hair pulled back in a bun, kneading dough. "Good morning," she said, smiling. He stopped in the doorway, just looking. She was flushed, had gained some weight. Her eyes sparkled. "You look beautiful," he said. And it wasn't flattery. It was the truth. Laura laughed. "And you're late for the barn." He hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Let the barn wait." They stood like that for a moment, just breathing together, listening to the good silence that now filled the house. In the afternoon, they planted together in the garden. Laura insisted on helping, even though Tomas grumbled that she should be resting. She just rolled her eyes and kept digging. "Remember what I said about planting being an act of faith?" she asked. "I remember. I have faith now. For real. And you taught me it's worth loving again. Because in the end, the impossible wasn't bringing Laura back from death. It was learning to love in a way so deep, so true, that even death had to wait. And it still waits, because love, when it's real, knows no end, only new beginnings. The rain fell lightly on the old roof, but inside the house there was light, there was laughter, there was life. And there were two hearts that, against all odds, learned that it's worth fighting for. It's always worth it. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in their place? Comment and share with someone special.